Just wanted to ask you about a guy like Jake Gensel, who we were just having a conversation about just needing to have guys who have been there before. What's the importance of that on an NHL roster?
Well, I think it's really important when you get down the stretch. You know how hard it is to compete every night, and I think especially for skilled players, I think there's a big adjustment between regular season's success and playoff success in most cases. I found in my coaching career that might have been one of the most difficult things is to get star players to understand that quite often in playoff time you just don't have time and space to do as much individually. So it becomes a more almost like a simplified game. And I know what I'm saying, it probably doesn't apply to Connor McDavid, but he's exceptional. I mean, when you look at his stats, you compare him to Gretzky and Mario. But for a lot of other high talented players, I think that's the biggest transition that they have to make in order to be successful in the playoff. Because you look at the goals, and even to me, Edmonton is a great example. You look at that game 4 at home, the goals that they score, they went to the net, they got on the inside, they tipped pucks, they screened the goalie. So it wasn't many very beautiful play, really. And so I think that's a difficult transition for some of the star players. And when it comes to Jake Gunsel, like you mentioned, I think he's not a big player, but for a small player, he plays on the inside. He goes into the dirty areas. He goes to the front of the net. And one of his greatest abilities is to find open space. Why he was so successful playing with Crosby is that they had some chemistry, but Sid is a player that likes the give and go game. Sid is great at controlling the puck down low, and if you can get yourself open for a split second, he'll get the puck to you. And Jake was great at that, getting that open space and going to the net and getting the 30 goals. And he's a very smart player, very individual player. Because I remember when I was there, I was in charge of the penalty killing, and I wanted to use Jake as a penalty killer. But Mike Sullivan said no, he doesn't like the highly skilled players to kill penalties, didn't want them to block shots. So, but it just shows how smart he is and how a 200-foot player he is.
Sure. Well, Jacques, speaking of that, like in your experience in hockey, which goes back, for a long time, a plethora of experience. And if you have a player who can't elevate in the playoffs, like you're talking about, who I don't know if they refuse to or they're not capable of, but you have a player that's not able to get it done when it matters, a high-end player, say a Mitch Marner, what do you do with them? Is it different nowadays? Are they a lost cause? Can they learn how to become that player? Or what would you do with a player like Mitch Marner at this point in time with what he's shown?
Well, I think each individual player is different. I think that's the one thing, and the longer you stay in the game, you learn every year. And what's impressed me this year about the Florida Panthers is how some of those players that they've acquired either through trades, even on acquired on the waivers, have become outstanding players for them. So when you look, for instance, at the defenseman like Forsling, he's become a force on their blue line, and he was a waiver pickup. Now you look at other players that they've acquired that have been in other organization and were just maybe average players, not even players that excel. You look at a Reinhardt, who's become a key member of their successful organization. You look at Berube. Several of those, I'm talking about players that are top 2 line players that it took quite a bit of time for them to really kind of mature, learn, feel comfortable, and being in the right environment. Sometimes that's also a key, playing with the right people. So, when you look at a Mitch Marner, I think maybe this year he hasn't had as good a season or as good a playoff as you'd like, but he's still a top end player. And I think it's difficult to get those players. And really the key is to be able to build, as a coach, relationships with those players, to be able to work with them on a day-to-day basis. And each individuals are different. You have to have a different approach with each player. And I think because you need highly skilled players to win. Yes, you also need a lot of depth. I think that a lot of times you win the Stanley Cup, your star players have to excel, but at the same time, your depth players have to perform. They've got to bring you a contribution. And I think in the last two games, we've seen that from Edmonton. Yes, the star player, Connor McDavid, has been a force, but also when you look at the Connor Brown, the Jan Mark, some of Perry, some of those support guys, they're also contributing. So it's a dilemma that's not easy for an organization to deal with.
It's a healthy balance, and obviously we want to shift the focus to the Maple Leafs, this being Leafs Morning Take. But pertaining to Mitch Marner, so let's say you're Craig Berube, let's say you're the brain trust right now. Would you be lobbying to the GM and everybody involved to maybe keep Mitch Marner as opposed to trading him because of everything you just mentioned about unlocking some things in the Stanley Cup playoffs?
Well, I think so, especially now that you have a new coach come in. So I think maybe it's an opportunity for him to build a relationship with Mitch Marner, and I know the challenge for a general manager these days is very difficult because of the cap. When you're the Toronto Maple Leaf, you have players like you've got highly paid players like Marner, Matthews, Tavares. And then also that they signed Nylander. It's difficult to build a support cast that's going to be good enough to win a cup. But there's many areas that I think that, like it seems like Marner has been a focus this year with the Leaf. But I think you got to look at goaltending as well as goaltending. When you look at all those years that they've had a team that's been a top team in regular season and have had trouble finding success in the playoff. And I wish they would have been like that when I was coaching the Ottawa Senators, because it was the opposite. We were the team that had the success in the regular season, and for some reason we always seem to have to meet the Toronto Maple Leaf with Pat Quinn and the Corson, the Gary Roberts, the Joe Nieuwendyk. Those guys that were really muckers and great players, but at the same time, we just seem to not be able to get through them. So it's kind of the reverse now with the Leaf. But I think that you need highly skilled players, and you also need good depth to be successful.
Jacques, over your career that spans a long time, I mean, when I played, say, 05 to 18, I noticed a big change in the mentality of players, and your career spanned a lot further than that. What have you changed, and have you changed anything from your management style and coaching style from a player, say, when you started to, say, this year?
Well, definitely, you have to adjust. I mean, I think players are great people, great players. Even today, because they're different, it doesn't mean that they're not as good a people or as good a person or as good a players. I think players today are extremely highly skilled. I mean, the speed of the game is unbelievable. Like this year, coming back to coaching this year, I saw it firsthand, like how fast the game is and how good the players are now in tight areas, being able to stick handle the puck, beat an opponent. There's so much more one-on-one in the game in this day compared to the past. Maybe the one area that lacks a little bit or need to be taught a little more is the game management now. I think because the guys are so highly skilled, they need to also understand that you need to respect the opposition and also understand that some point in time or some areas on the ice that there's certain things you can't create turnovers and they could be costly. And to me, a great example, I think, is the Edmonton Oilers. When you look at that team, how they started poorly. And I know their coach, and I've had an opportunity to coach a couple games with him when I was with the Rangers, and I have tremendous respect about his composure, about his patience, his presence in the room, and I think his presence with the players. And I think he's been a key component of the change in the Oilers' success. I think they're still highly skilled. They still play a fast game, but they've become more responsible, and they've become understand that, you know, you've got to play both ways. And you look at a guy like McDavid. To me, it's impressive. Like last night, you know, how many times he's the first guy back. He's the guy lifting the opposition stick to steal a puck. He's the guy back helping his defense. I don't think you saw that from him in his early days in his career. So there's a learning curve that takes time, and I think that's you know, I think with highly skilled players, it takes maybe a little longer to learn that you have to adjust your game, and the game has changed from a standpoint that because players are so highly skilled, you see goals like McDavid's goal last night on Bobrovsky. I mean, like it shouldn't go in, but it's not the first one that he scored, and it won't be the last one. And the play that he made, like the pass on Perry's goal, you know, like both their power play goals really came at the end of the power play. And the pass that he made, like when he entered the zone and beat really four Panthers player, and then just laid a perfect pass to Perry, who just put it in. But, you know, I mean, he's an exceptional player. He's a generational player. You don't have many of those players in the league.
Out of this world, and you guys can speak to this better than me, but obviously sometimes a small little tinker, a coaching change can do a lot for a player, a team. And we look at the Maple Leafs. Obviously, Sheldon Keefe out did a great job, but it was time for a fresh new voice. Craig Berube comes in. What did you make of that? Do you think Berube can unlock something in this team?
I think so. I think Greg's got, you know, good experience. I think he's very knowledgeable. He's won a Stanley Cup. He's got good experience, and I think with a coach, the longer you're in the game, I think the more you learn, the more experience you have. I think you get better and better as you get older. And you know, like you look at Scotty Bowman. Yes, he had a great career in the beginning, but also he was out of the game for a couple of years. Was in the media side, and then he came back with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and then went to Detroit. And we know what his contribution was and how successful he was. So I think there's with Greg, I think he's going to bring like you say, a different dimension to the hockey team, a different personality, and it's nothing to take away from Sheldon Keefe. I think he did a great job, but I think probably sometimes it's not only the coach, sometimes it's the players being at a timing where they're willing to learn and willing to accept. I'll give you a good example. When I joined the Pittsburgh Penguins, not my first, I went with Mike Johnson, was the head coach. And then when they made the change to Mike Sullivan, his first meeting with the players, I remember vividly, like talking about how you need elite player, how you need star players. We have Crosby, Malcolm, Letang, but we need to put the team first. And to me, the key was not only Mike coming in, but the timing was right, because the Penguins had won the Stanley Cup, I think in 2009 was their last cup, and they thought they were going to build a dynasty, and it never happened. They never got back to the final, to the Stanley Cup final. So the players were at a time, they were receptive when Mike came in, and that year when he came in, just before Christmas, we went on to win the cup in 16 and 17. So it's twofold. So I think with Craig Berube coming in there, and also I think now players like Matthews, Tavares, who's been around longer, but Marner, young guys that are counting on, I think they may have a different perspective as well, and are maybe more willing to accept what Craig has to bring to the table.
And from your standpoint, when you're entering the playoffs and it's a different style of hockey, what do you do to prepare your players for that? It's obvious the Leafs have fallen into a rut, not been able to score in the playoffs. That's been the thing we talk about a lot. Is there anything specific you do to prepare your players for playoff hockey and how to have success in it?
Well, I think that's why you use the season, really. And probably the greatest example of that has got to be the Florida Panthers. I remember 3 years ago, I was in Florida 3 years ago, and I went to a lot of the Panthers game, and that was the year that they won the President's Cup. with Andrew Burnett as their head coach, and they could score goals. They would win games 6-4, 7-5. And I remember telling myself, geez, I like this team, but they're not playing playoff hockey at all. They're going to have some issues coming into the playoff. Yes, they beat the Washington Capitals in the first round and then lost 4 straight to Tampa in the second round. And that's when Bill Zito made the move, changed the coaching staff, made the big trade to Chuck for Huberdeau. And at the same time, it doesn't happen overnight. It took Paul Maurice almost at least half a season to change the style, to change the mentality of the player, and to get them to play a style that would be more conducive to success in the playoff. But it's a fine line. They could have missed the playoff last year. I don't know if you'll remember, but
Yeah.
Pittsburgh lost to, I think, was Columbus or Chicago. And if they beat those 2 teams that were at the bottom, Florida wouldn't have made the playoff. So would have they continued? But unfortunately, they made the playoff. And then we saw them took off, like when they beat Boston in the first round, and then went right to the final, to the Stanley Cup final. And then at the start of the season, I was in Florida and I went to some of their games, and it was the same thing. They were missing, I think you remember, Montour and Ekblad, 2 of their key guys that had surgery in the off season. They didn't miss a beat at all. Like, they were a hard-working team. They would grind you. They were physical. They had good depth, played the same way, and it gave them good success. And really, I tip my hat to how they play, because it's a difficult game, a difficult style to maintain for a full season and the playoff. And they've had good success. I know the last 2 games they've struggled with the Panthers, but when you look at that team, how they've played, I mean, it's been outstanding. So I think it's not a switch. You don't change, like, because regular season ends yesterday, now we start playoff, we're going to play a different style. I don't think it happens that way. It's got to be taught. It's got to be put in place during regular season. And as well, I think sometimes it depends of makeup, but I like the way Edmonton is now when you're looking at 2 skilled guys with more of a grinder on the line. I think that brings a lot to a hockey team. And I go back to my days in Pittsburgh, like Chris Kunitz, for instance. Well, he wasn't a star, but he played a role with Crosby. I mean, he was very important, whether it was Crosby or Malcolm. That's the way he played the game. So I think you're going to see more and more of that, because of the playoff style, that you don't have room for that fancy stuff. You need the guys that could grind, but they got to be smart enough to play with a high-end skill player.
Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.